Are you feeling burnout? If not, can you please tell the rest of the world, the millions and millions of people that are, what the heck is the secret sauce? Dr. Frazee and I today, Crystal Frazee and I, are going to be discussing this topic because while we both have been working with women's health, we've both been working with women in pain, she, like I, realized that we need a radical, radical, radical shift in how we're dealing with just stress in general. Dr. Crystal is a burnout recovery and stress resiliency coach. She has over 16 years of experience in her work dealing with pain of the body, mind, and soul. We discuss how she grew up in the South, that whole Southern Belle thing. And I can tell you from moving from New York and then moving down here, I can definitely tell the difference in how we are expected to sort of repress and kind of smile and say, bless you, bless your heart. And, versus kind of like get it out there and be a little bit more upfront, like the weight of the world. So we discussed a little bit of that about that. She has spent many years working as both a yoga teacher and yoga therapist. As well as a doctor of physical therapy. And so I can really relate to that because that is my background as well. And so much is lifestyle, and so much is body awareness, and so much is her work with, her method, the somatic attunement method, is sort of trying to get women out of their heads and into their bodies, into our hearts, into our guts. So that we don't get diseased. We don't have chronic illnesses that we end up needing to manage amongst raising the kids, being the breadwinner. This is her story too. And so, as you know, I love to feature women who have flipped their pain, turned it into a passion, and then into a project that they've placed into profit, because so many times our mess is our path, our sacred success path. And so I am so excited to bring to you my conversation with Crystal Frazee.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. We'll walk the goddess path less traveled together to respectfully debate, supportively co-create, and wildly celebrate the unique passion, gratitude, and impact only a connection with women in wise counsel can provide. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Beautiful guys, thank you so much for being here for another episode of Owning Her Health. I am super excited because my guest today, we've been in each other's circles, I don't know, several years in certain things. We're both physical therapists, moved into health coaching, particularly working with women, probably have that same similar burnout and stress induced kind of looking for our own careers. Dr. Crystal Frazee is my guest today. And like I said, we've been crisscrossing paths, and she's now developed a wonderful method. Dr. Crystal, tell us very succinctly, much better than probably I can do, what the heck got you, number one, into physical therapy, and was that your first career, and then brought you through the process of now really what I see you as is more of that, coach in general, almost a life coach really is where I feel health and wellness needs to come at this point. So give us a little bit of your story on how your journey, your own goddess wisdom journey, got you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, it's so great to be here. Thank you. And to connect with your listeners. Oh, my journey. I don't even know what metaphor to give. I guess it's like a meandering river, right? Started out in ecology and very much interested in the intersection of systems and how one thing affects another. And so that really informs a lot of the way that I see things. But then I found myself moving, wanting to go to graduate school, went into physical therapy with thoughts of basically being like a PT version of Brene Brown, like really diving into chronic pain was definitely my specific area of interest, women's health, researching, writing, and teaching, that sort of thing. But then I ended up moving into clinical practice, and like most, clinicians do, found it to be rather demanding with clinical care. I was an outpatient, and I've had lots of specialties throughout the past 15 years. Constant feeling like I needed to learn more, do more, add more, and just keeping up with all of it, the time demands, the pressure of the ever-changing landscape of healthcare with insurances and stuff. I really loved it and loved my connection with my clients, but it wasn't really like fueling me like I thought it would when I was in grad school. And as a women's health PT, I decided to add coaching. I've done a couple of different coaching programs. One is women's health specific and one is not. And I just found that gave me such a valuable skill set that I was interested in going kind of that direction. So when I left my clinical practice, I started out focusing in women's chronic pain and had a company called mindfulpainrelief.org and had programs and, a beautiful practice serving that niche, and worked with women and actually some men, but from all over the world, who have tried all kinds of things, experimental surgeries and, thalamic nerve ablations, trying to reduce the pain, all kinds of things. And what I learned was that the mind-body connection is like effective,
Right.
that people who are even really new to that sort of terminology or practices can learn it, and really enjoyed, having a flourishing business, helping people manage chronic pain. But the pattern that I recognized was that it wasn't that the clients I was working with didn't have access to the tools to reduce their pain. The real underlying root issue, not for everybody, let's say it's like an 80-20, plus I mostly women clients here, was giving themselves the permission to take the time, to take the energy to, to recover, because they desperately wanted to. And they've already, usually exhausted lots of other things. But at this point, it was really getting to this root worthiness and the blocks that are so very deep beneath the surface. And I was thinking about this a lot. And actually, one day I had a dream, and I woke up thinking like, I have to really focus on this piece. I had a dream, woke up and said, this is the good woman rebellion, and it's a lot of fed into the work I do now, is, helping people unlearn those patterns that keep them stuck in their healing journey or their professional journey or whatever that is. So now, I'm a burnout coach for professional women, and specifically type A, high achievers. I think we can both recognize, see ourselves kind of in that a little bit. Overflowing to-do lists, but living in chronic high levels of stress where, it's starting to take a toll on their career, on their relationships, or on their health. And they're really to a point now where they kind of have to turn that around.
Right.
So it's a privilege.
You've been conditioned, and you did the work on, and you almost like are conditioned as the controller and the analyzer and this and that. But there in your heart, I find burnout is really a symptom of sort of being that, closet supporter all of a sudden, or not getting that support back, and not getting that promotion back. So you're constantly like, you're told to do this sort of competitive model of achievement. But the reality is your method may be, or your process, which I coined the curvy hustle, or the more feminine look of those same things, is really in that supporter, promoter type of side of things. And so, there's this huge problem and demand on energy. And as you spoke so eloquently, and now you have that, somatic attunement method, this is a whole body process. So, what what is it about this high achieving woman right now that you're finding is really, like you said, like giving herself permission? I mean, but we're living sort of in this total chaos. So
Right.
what is really the place of surrender you found to be that opening for most of these women that you work best with? Obviously, there's
Hmm.
different people for different entry
Hmm.
points.
Yeah. So when I think of burnout, the work, and a lot of people that I work with actually don't even use the word burnout. So let's
Mm-hmm.
call it chronic stress or overwhelm
Right.
or just
Or
not
even
feeling
normal.
content.
It's just my
Yes.
life. It's just my
Yes.
life. They
Yes.
get trapped in it, in that sort of
Right.
victimization a little bit. Yeah.
Right. It's super intense. Yes. But I think that the way to undress it,
Yeah.
address it is in three different ways. So we've got the workplace and the work environment, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of obvious, right? You can't have a toxic workplace and expect for that to nurture you in your own sort of stress recovery. But also personal, and that's a lot of the work that you and I both support women to do. That's those inner boundaries, those mindset shifts, all the things that are coming from within and mixing with the structure of our chaotic lives. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm in the weeds with young children and business
Right.
ownership and all of that stuff. And then there's also the third part is cultural. And the cultural
Mm-hmm.
piece, I'm really dedicated to making a change in the way that we accept as women that culture has shaped us, and that we start to not accept that and make some changes. So to answer your question, I really feel like as a young girl, now I'm going to caveat this to the listeners that I'm from the deep South. And
Mm-hmm.
I say that I'm a recovering Southern belle.
Mm-hmm.
And, in that, so I'm speaking from my perspective of living that experience. But, young girls are pretty quiet, supportive, selfless, generous, right? Accommodating,
Mm-hmm.
nurturing,
Yeah.
right? Affectionate, like all of those things.
You're
And
the
so
wonderful
basically,
woman behind the leading man.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, at least for me and a lot of the women that I work with, kind of, taught to be the good girl in one way or another. And to be a good girl in its most simple form is to be in service of something else, whether that's the ideal that your community or your parents or your family structure set for you, whatever that means. And as we grow and we've had these different career experiences, and here we are still looking to live up to those expectations, but none of that has taught us to be in service of our own values, our own real goals, discovering what our own desires are, what brings us pleasure, contentment, and fulfillment. Like, what is true satisfaction if we had never been faced with that? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that, helping women with this is to really ask those powerful questions as a coach and let them discover, wow, like, here we go. For example, like, what do I need? Like, what does Lisa need?
Right.
Right. In any given moment of the day, in any given scenario, whether you're feeling something physical, emotional, even spiritual, what do you need in response to that? And I usually just really get a blank stare and a lot of space when I ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and that tells me, and I used to also have the same struggle. So that really tells me there's that disconnect between what do I need, what's in service of myself, and what's in service to everyone else. And that really leads all of it. That's
Right.
the women I used to work with in pain not being able
Right.
to actually implement what they hired me to teach them
Right.
in some ways. And as a high achieving, professional woman, really wanting to pursue, some big goals, and what I see as my potential and my clients is very similar, right? And it's just peeling it back layer by layer, getting to know who I am, and for my clients, who they are authentically in baby steps.
Right. And like you said, it's such a conditioning of what does everybody else need, and then you're sort of like last on the totem pole there.
Mm-hmm.
You get the
Mm.
scraps, and then like what I call it is, you turn into that person. Like I call myself the alchemist. because
Mhm.
I can turn like, literal crap into gold. Like you
Right.
become so good at doing that
Right.
sometimes, or you just give in and you're like the total like martyr person, like quietly resentful, hating
Right.
everybody. And either
Right.
way, again, right, we get a lot of these people into the clinic.
Mhm.
This is their repressed pain coming out as
Mhm.
something they could truly get credit for having a problem with,
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
disconnects.
Right.
So like if you were to talk to the you of 10 years ago where you were on the path, because I think a lot of people hear this and they're like, well, that's great, Crystal, but like my life's
Mhm.
different, right? Because they're
Mhm.
stuck in.
Sure.
That's why they
Mhm.
need that, anybody listening to this, and if you're in that kind of mode, that's why you need the coaching. You need the
Mhm.
therapy to maybe see it, but then you need the coaching because you're going to always have the excuse, especially if you're highly educated, especially if you're
Mhm.
highly strategic, especially if you've been in there playing the
Right.
competitive game. You can
Right.
find a reason for anything to work. That's why you get people enrolled in your stuff,
Mhm.
but you need to have
Right.
that flip. So 10 years
Right.
ago, talking to that Crystal where you were, what would you
Mhm.
love to kind of, right? So if we're thinking quantum living, you can whisper that into her ear right now. What would you tell
Right.
her?
Oh, I think the gift to my 10-year ago self, let's see. I don't know. I really kind of want to go back to like 20 years ago for where I would have been on my journey. But it would have just been like, I mean, not to be cliched, but like the world is your oyster. You
Mm-hmm.
can experience true satisfaction. And that is not going to happen after you satisfy someone else's needs, right? So the permission to feel safe, to really know myself and what I wanted, what would truly be satisfying for me, and then just the unconditional permission to do that and not
Mm-hmm.
consider any of the other expectations. So
Yeah.
I call those expectations that I described earlier the perfection paradox. And once it's set up in childhood, it follows us through
Mm-hmm.
the decades in different ways as our roles shift, right? So I was, a college student and then a graduate student and working through both of those, and then a young professional, and then married, and then raising children, then a homeowner, right? A car owner in the community on boards of things, right? So it just keeps expanding. And as that happens, you add a new role. Well, there's an expectation that you have, and it's unspoken in your mind of how it's supposed to look. And you only have so much time and energy to fulfill that. And it's going to happen as an exchange of your own
Mm-hmm.
satisfaction in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is something to checking off to-do lists and getting a dopamine hit,
Mm-hmm.
to being the one that people go to because you're the badass that gets the job done best, or
Mm-hmm.
you're efficient, you're reliable, right? Like I think a lot of the clients that I work with, and I would put myself in that category, at some point identified with those sort of descriptions, and then feel really disappointed if we're not fulfilling that, right? It's that high
Right.
achiever drive. So I call that like the go-to gal, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
listeners can kind of ask themselves, are they the go-to gal? And
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just every time you say yes to someone else's request, you're saying no to
Yeah.
yourself in
Right.
some way. You
Which
get
is
this,
which is okay, but it's when you get that
yeah,
imbalance, when you're,
yes,
the words I use are like, obviously with owning her health being the name of this, but like
yes,
the ownership over the process, but really taking responsibility and 100%
hmm,
responsibility, which is not the same as doing something obligatory or for the
yes,
other people's expectations, which I think people are a little
right,
confused about, especially when
hmm,
they've been conditioned in that good girl thing and you're thinking through the eyes of a young child learning that process, that
right,
you may have not understood that what you're, you may have not understood the difference between the woman in your life that were doing that, taking full ownership over the process and the consequences, and yet, maybe doing something for themselves later or something, or the women that
hmm,
were just self-sacrificing to the point of like, please love me, please respect me, please
hmm,
whatever, but they're never
right,
going to get it because their whole story is wrapped around other people needing them more than they need other people. And you can't
hmm,
have both. You can't
Mm-hmm.
have both.
Right.
So I love that. So describe a little bit, tell us for a few minutes, a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
your method and, somatic attunement method. Some people might not understand somatic,
Mm-hmm.
and how obviously, aligning that. Where did that sort
Yeah.
of come from?
Well, so somatic is basically just talking about your body. We all have one. And
Mm-hmm.
what I find is that, a lot of people, but my work is with women, so
Mm-hmm.
to some extent men are included in this, but
Yeah. The
you know,
courageous ones that reach out. I get the same
yeah,
thing.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Are just like not connected in their body. They're very, very smart, very brilliant in a lot of ways. And they've tried a lot of things to, feel better, whether that's just to feel less stressed or to move along to that next journey, to feel like they're really thriving in a new, bigger role in their career, that they can really handle it, that they're sustainable, um, and they're living like from the shoulders up. They're just,
Mm-hmm. In your head.
living.
Yep.
Yeah. And this would be literally like, hey, let's open your calendar. Let me share the screen. Let me see it. What does this look like for the next 2 weeks? And I'm like, clearly you're not in your body because no person can fulfill this. Right. And I'm talking about things like getting up early to work, then get the kids going, then work the full day, and then come home, do the family thing, and then get back on and work some more. Right.
Right.
Um, where, we're just not in our bodies, not in the body, not connected to physical sensations. I had a client that was in the hospital for 3 days doing tests because they thought she had a stroke. And it was just, rolling migraines, and it was like not paralysis, but it was definitely numbness of one side of the
Because
face.
the body keeps the score and it's going to
Yeah,
want to do what it needs to stop you.
right. And so if we back that up, what were those early warning signs, right? And I also have to preface this with, these things are not your fault. If you kind of are hearing this, I'm not blaming someone for not having the skills of
Right,
listening to
right.
their
Like
body,
full
right?
responsibility is not necessary, is not blame, is not
Right.
blame. Yes.
Right, right. Culture didn't teach you, school didn't teach you, church didn't teach you, your family didn't teach you, right? You may be this days old that you're ever knowing this is a thing and that you can learn it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are warning signs, and whether that's what we feel physically, emotionally, mentally, right? When you may come home from a long day and you feel tired, is it physical fatigue? Is it mental fatigue? Is it being emotionally drained? And knowing what's happening in your body and discerning those things is going to tell you what you need to do. Right. So I think these conversations have to be relative to something. Right. So the women I work with generally want to feel physically energized, capable of doing whatever they want. So if they have activities they're passionate about, golf, soccer, whatever, um, pain-free isn't really a sensation, but comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So listeners can ask, like, well, on an ideal day, how do you want to feel? And then emotionally, generally women want to feel grounded, peaceful, joyful, a sense of wholeness,
Right.
a sense of
Stable,
connectedness.
stable,
Yes.
right.
Right. And then mentally, we want to feel like we have the mental capacity, we have the energy to do what we need to do, no brain fog, things like that. And we have the creativity to do it. And so, it's relative to that, right? It's knowing what is this ideal state that I want to be in, and then comparing, right? You come home at the end of the day, you're tired. What are you feeling? And
Right.
so many adults do not have a vocabulary to even say the words of what they're feeling.
Yeah. It sounds a
Or
lot like when I'm
yeah,
talking with people with like just the life coaching aspect or kind of I'm working a lot of times with like making those inflection points. So there's going to have to be transformation. This is not about let me change my routine up. Let me
right,
do a different diet now. Let me let
right,
me let me get a different day planner. This is
right,
like I'm probably going to pull something out that's going to affect other people's lives. That's because you're stuck on that old identity, that old version or vision of you. And
mhm,
the problem is, you're in the gap already. Like, I can't go back there. It's like when you have a kid, or
Right.
you have sex for the first time. You're not a
Mhm.
virgin anymore. You can't go back.
Mhm.
Okay? It's just
Mhm.
the way it is. But you're sitting
Mhm.
there and you're like, not yet with the next time.
Mhm.
And you're like, what can I,
Right.
like, you can't go home, but you're not quite enrolled
Mhm.
into that new identity. So is that the
Right.
same thing with kind of the work you're doing? Like, they're just like, they're
Mhm.
not enrolled in that new body that might be really logical, or sound, whatever, but they're just sort of still, they're kind of stuck in that gap.
Yeah, yeah, just really like from the neck up, like this is what I do. I just get up and do as much as I can. But when you ask the powerful question, what for? What is this for? What's the end point? What are we
Mm-hmm.
working towards?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has an answer. And so, somatic attunement is being able to access body wisdom where your body can tell
Mm-hmm.
you these things. How much can I work today? When do I need breaks? Do I need to recharge? Am I hungry, thirsty? Do I have to pee? Do I need connection, right? Am I getting enough pleasure in my life? Am I satisfied with the vision I have for my life? Do I know my values? And my actions align with those values? And your body has like a yes response and a no response. And, those folks I've worked with chronic headaches and, muscle tension and stuff like that, it's really important to understand, like, not just that there's pain, but what is your body communicating,
Right.
and to build that vocabulary and that language, because at some point we took more on and our body was saying
Yeah.
no.
And you're really not,
No.
so is that sort of, so I know you have a 2-day experience, the Revive 2-day VIP experience. Tell us a little bit, is this the process that they'll be getting, or what's different
Mhm.
about
So
that?
Revive is the first way that clients work with me.
Mm-hmm.
And, the women I'm working for are ready for a change. They
Mm-hmm.
have tried other things. They've had, changes in their life that they're just not going to tolerate anymore. They're just really kind of at the end of that rope and they're like, all right, I've got to do something. And, they've tried time management, productivity, self-care, and none of those things are the answer. And so, in the work of the Revive program, it's, recognizing that the women that are in this place don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of bandwidth. They don't have a lot of capacity to take on some difficult to learn process,
Right.
and
They
so
can't
it's
go off to Bali for a month and then come back and
right.
act like real life is anything like that.
That's right, right. Actually, they kind of at this point feel like they would need to go to a deserted island and leave it all
Right,
behind.
just stay,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They
or
might not
burn it
come back
down.
if they do that.
That's
So
right.
they're trying to find an alternative, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but that is funny you say that because I hear that a lot. Like, oh,
Right, that's what they do.
I have a vacation in a little bit. That'll be okay. That's never the answer, ladies. Never the answer.
You gotta come back. You
Yes.
gotta come back.
Yeah. So Revive is really kind of hand holding, like literally, let's pull up your calendar, let's look at it, let's talk about it. But Revive is an acronym. And we
Mhm.
go through those steps. And the goal is that you leave the 2 days, they're 2 half days,
Mhm.
so that you have lots of time to breathe. I send you a kit ahead of time, and
Mhm.
you have 20, like 15 to 20-minute breaks every hour, and
Mhm.
you do something from the kit for nervous system regulation. Like, you
Mhm.
can't regulate and calm your system until you know what that feels like
Right. You don't
and
go
how
off
to
and
do that.
go hang out and do a bunch of emails. This isn't something
Right.
that, right? Like
That's right. You can't work during this time. Yes. But once you get a taste of it, when we're together on this session, then you can work on, finding it again. And yeah, and then you get a guide at the end. So it's, very curated. We're working on your first blocks, like we're peeling the onion and we're on those surface layers. And we make this plan with how you're going to take it step by step through the Revive acronym, and really get to a place where you feel like, I can do this, right? I can run with this plan. It's going to be like a little manuscript for you, your new burnout Bible, and you're going to follow that. And then you have ongoing access to me through like a walkie-talkie,
Mhm.
kind of, on the spot coaching. So like,
Mhm.
oh, somebody just asked me to do this extra thing with like a 48-hour turnaround. How do I do that?
Mhm.
But it's really just a beautiful container to get started because it's bite size and it's doable. And it's so deeply intimate between the two of us that you
Right.
have all of my attention for that.
Right.
And it's been received really well from
Yeah.
women who
Because
can't do more.
it sounds perfect for that supporter personality.
Mhm.
One of the entry points into my program is sort of had them figuring themselves out on a psychosocial graphic, because some of them, again, right, they're
Mhm.
so not in their body that they almost
Right.
have to like see it in an analytic sort of like,
Right.
oh, that makes sense. It's kind of like
Right.
people looking at horoscopes. Oh yeah, I'm like that.
Right.
Um, and it sounds perfect for that like supporter kind of steadiness, like
Mhm.
real team player, but yet they're
Mhm.
like never going to be like the lead on the team. They're never going to get the byline. Like they're so great at supporting everybody, but
Mhm.
like almost like stealth. Like that's the problem, right? You get so competent at it that people sometimes forget, or they take you for granted unless you're
Mhm.
setting up those boundaries. That's what a lot of these
Mhm.
women don't, or men, or just people in general don't understand.
Right.
People need to be reminded of what you're doing for them, especially if you're
Mhm.
promoting them on top of that, because they think it's all
Right.
them.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. For
Right? They start
sure.
believing what you've enrolled them in. So that sounds
Right.
beautiful, Crystal.
Right.
So if this revolution of the good woman rebellion is successful,
Mhm.
and we're down the road 10 years or so. Now I'm going to flip what I asked you in the
Mhm.
beginning. That wise woman, that woman that kind of saw, what, it's not just about the world outside ecology. It's not just about
Mhm.
bringing that into systems in the body for pain care. It's not just about therapy, it's coaching. So now we're like 10 years down the road where it's
Mhm.
it's come into play, especially at this container, moving out of the
Mhm.
past 2 years of this global revolution on itself. What is she in that
Mhm.
vision telling you right now for
Mm.
support?
What
What do
a
you look
lovely
for?
question. That's great. Yeah, I think she's just telling me to keep going. Just keep going. I feel really fortunate that I'm doing work that I feel really confident in and that is completely fulfilling. Completely fulfilling. And I've lived it, right? It's my
Mm-hmm.
own journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that she's just saying, even when it's, the path isn't clear, the path feels hard, just to keep going. Like, I am writing a book,
Mm-hmm.
and for sure there's new things to learn about that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the
Mm-hmm.
book is actually called Revive, and it's the Revive
Mm-hmm.
methodology turned into a book.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's going to be a lot of those types of opportunities that are new, and to stick with the products of my own burnout recovery. And honestly, this is a little personal, but in my own burnout recovery, I didn't really touch on that too much, but I learned that I've had complex trauma. And I think that a lot of high achieving women, and just even looking at the cultural lens that we all have been grown, raised through, I think almost all women have had complex trauma,
Yeah, I
you
actually am
know.
writing a book very similar. We're on a very similar path,
Mm.
because I think just the anointing of womanhood
Mhm.
is carrying that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Hmm.
And so, for me, the burnout recovery has been trauma recovery as well.
Hmm.
And I feel like a different person on the other side, and I couldn't be more grateful, right? To
Thank you so
be,
much for sharing
yeah.
that. I love that sentiment, because,
Mm.
I really do. It's so important for us. And I think we've lost this aspect of womanhood in the equality conversation, that was our form and function, like that there is a purpose to holding containers, safe spaces where it's not about vulnerability. I kind of am like past that, the whole vulnerability thing. I think we need to kind of see it, but I feel like that's, again, discrediting the strength and vulnerability. It's not a
Mhm.
weakness that we're okay with. It's
Mhm.
actually way stronger to show up and surrender some of those layers, like you said, and
Right.
still feel empowered and have boundaries to that, and layers of that. So thank you so much for sharing
Yes.
that, because we need to
Right.
see other women who we value are
Mhm.
mentoring us that are
Right.
not perfect, but they're not broken either. They're not,
Right.
it actually is a real big strength. So thank you so
Mhm.
much for modeling that. That I think is
Right.
embodied leadership in a very
Mhm.
feminine form. So tell us how is best for us to get in contact with you and connected with
Mhm.
you and make sure that we are, I put everything on the show notes. So definitely if you're
Mhm.
listening into this, go on to the
Right.
Owning Her Health show notes and take a look at Dr. Crystal's episode. But how could we
Mhm.
directly get into all your yummy stuff?
Yes, I would love to share that. If it's okay, real quick, can I say
Mm-hmm.
one thing in response to what you
Yes.
said about the role models? So, for sure, there's not really a single person I've worked with as a client that had a role model
Mm-hmm.
for boundaries, for stress
Mm-hmm.
resilience, for really stepping into this ownership of really this life that she's curating and what the result is going to be and how she wants to feel about it, how she wants to feel in her body. And so I just want to point that out to the listeners, to really look at your family of origin, your circle of friends, like
Mm-hmm.
who is really embodying this. And if you can't easily point that out, number one, that's not your fault. It's very common. And number two, start to look for that. So it could be someone like Dr. Lisa here, right? And for a lot of my clients, I am that role model
Mm-hmm.
until they develop their own and become their own themselves. Find them in movies, find them in popular culture, other personalities, but we have to find them so that we can walk in those
Yeah,
steps,
because we
right?
don't, I mean, that's the thing, you guys listening in right now, you need to understand we're the first wave of this. This isn't
Absolutely.
this isn't feminism. This is
Hmm.
not. This is actually womanism. I don't even want to take that
Hmm.
title because that's its own thing off of feminism. It
Right.
really is. This is the first wave of what I feel is just whole womanhood,
Hmm.
which is a sector and a specialty in whole humanhood, like
Hmm.
human beingness.
Right.
We do have a form, and like I was saying, you bring up a really good point to understand this isn't about a blamer. Like we really are the models for the next generation. Like there are not a lot of them out there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like we are going to have to see it in our providers and then see it in ourselves. And if you are this person that is connecting to this, because unfortunately so many women they don't think they need this.
Hmm.
They're very comfortable staying in that more conditioned controller, dominating warrior style. And that's
Hmm.
great. If your body can take it, great. But
Right.
Crystal and I will tell you, chances
Can't do it.
are you're not going to go the full length. You're
Right.
going to feel it. Either
Mm-hmm.
it looks like infertility for you right now, it looks like depression, anxiety, it's an addiction. Girls,
Right.
ladies, women, whatever you want to call yourself, person, if you're dealing with any
Mm.
of that, like she said, let's look at the trauma. Let's
Yeah.
look at the trauma.
Mhm.
So where are
Mhm.
we going to find you to jump into one of these 2-day VIP experiences?
Yeah.
Because I know a
Well,
lot of people need it.
mhm. So I would love to connect with any listeners, wanting to learn more about this just on my website. You can go to
Mm-hmm.
crystalfrazee.com. I have a really simple stress and overwhelm relief game plan, and it's a PDF followed by a short video about it's really 6 things you can do now. It takes you very little time and energy where you can actually feel like you can breathe for a second. So I would love for you to check that out if you feel like you need that support. Otherwise, my handle is at Dr. Crystal Frazee. So whether we're talking about Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or TikTok, it's at Dr. Crystal Frazee.
See lots of success and there's obviously a need, but even for any of the other providers that are listening for this, going through that program themselves so that they could
Mm-hmm.
even bring their genius to
Mm-hmm.
where they need to. Definitely reach out. All right, guys. So thank you so much. Any last words you have for the audience, or just in thinking of yourself to that? Um, what would you want to tell her right now, that woman 10 years down the road? You yourself.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm grateful that I see her. I think I'm in a place where I believe that I can feel spacious and not squeezed, and I can continue to create a life that's more full with more success without sacrificing my own ability to be present inside it. And so I think for the listeners, if I could do anything, it's just to give you that hope that I'm not minimizing it, single momhood, like all kinds of
Right.
things.
It's hard.
Just
It is
hard.
hard.
It's just
Right.
hard. And yet it can be easier,
Right.
right? It's
We
hard
can
and
make
it can
it
be
more
easier.
simple.
Yes.
But we need those communities. We need the right providers at the right
Right.
time, at the right space, and then
Mhm.
designing programs that work into our lives. Because,
Mhm.
it's great and
Right.
ideal to go, like we said, off to Bali for, a year. Great.
Mhm.
It just might not happen in your life.
Right.
All right, great. Dr. Crystal, thank you so much for being here. If anybody, like I said, will be on the show notes, and that's an FRA, right?
Yeah.
On the spelling, even though
Yep.
it's pronounced like a U on the
Yeah.
spelling for the .com. So make sure that you
Yeah.
reach out to either one of us and get on that program right now. Thank you so much for being on another episode of Owning Her Health. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.